Ever dropped a fascinating historical fact at a gathering, feeling like the smartest person in the room? Here's the uncomfortable truth. There's a strong chance you just shared pure fiction. Today isn't about gentle corrections. We're bringing a wrecking ball to the history you thought you knew. Get ready as we obliterate 33 of the most stubborn myths still masquerading as historical fact. Your perception of the past? It's about to get completely demolished. Myth number 1. Napoleon Bonaparte was extremely short. The ultimate short king with a Napoleon complex, right? The tiny dictator overcompensating for his lack of height with massive ambition? Wrong. Completely wrong. Bonaparte stood around 5 feet 7 inches tall, actually above average for Frenchmen of his era. So where did history's most famous height joke originate? Welcome to what might be the most effective propaganda campaign ever executed. British media relentlessly depicted him as a miniature, rage-filled monster, deliberately undermining his credibility. Think of it as the 1800s version of getting mercilessly trolled across social media. Add in a measurement confusion. French inches were slightly longer than British ones, and you've got a perfect storm of misinformation. Napoleon wasn't unusually short. He simply lost an international meme war combined with a units of measurement mishap. Myth number 2. Jesus was born on December 25th. About that Christmas date we all celebrate, it's essentially arbitrary. Scripture provides zero confirmation of Jesus' actual birth date. In fact, the clues we do have, like shepherds tending flocks outdoors at night, suggest a spring timeline, not winter. So why do we celebrate in late December? The early Christian church executed a masterful cultural merger. Romans were already throwing Saturnalia, a week-long pagan celebration filled with feasting, revelry, and general mayhem that peaked around December 25th. Rather than competing with the empire's most beloved festival, church leaders simply absorbed it. They strategically placed a major Christian observance directly over existing celebrations. Classic strategy: if you can't eliminate the competition, rebrand it entirely. Myth number 3. Gladiators routinely fought to the death. Hollywood's greatest Roman deception? The notion that gladiators constantly battled until one lay dead in the arena. Yes, fatal outcomes occurred, but they were exceptionally uncommon. The reason? Simple economics. Gladiators weren't expendable meat. They were the elite athletes of antiquity, the Michael Jordans and Cristiano Ronaldos of ancient Rome. Acquiring, training, and maintaining these fighters required enormous investment. No owner would casually sacrifice their million-dollar asset in his debut performance. Most confrontations resembled high-stakes sporting competitions, decided by technique, points, or first blood. These warriors were premium commodities in Rome's entertainment empire, far too valuable to waste for momentary spectacle. Myth 4. Slaves built the Egyptian pyramids. The image is burned into our collective consciousness. Endless rows of enslaved people, whipped mercilessly under the scorching desert sun, dragging massive stones for cruel pharaohs. Compelling narrative, totally false. Who actually constructed these architectural marvels? Paid laborers with impressive working conditions. Archaeological discoveries revealed purpose-built worker villages that tell a dramatically different story. These laborers received respectful burials. Their skeletal remains show evidence of quality medical treatment. Their compensation package? Bread, meat, and, here's the kicker, beer. This wasn't brutal enslavement. This was the Bronze Age's most impressive construction project, complete with benefits that would make modern workers jealous. Think less oppressed slave, more well-compensated specialist with excellent job perks. Myth number 5. Vikings wore horned helmets. Picture a Viking warrior in your mind right now. Massive build, unkempt beard, horned helmet, right? Erase that entire image immediately. Those iconic horned helmets have the same historical accuracy as dinosaurs and cavemen coexisting. A costume designer literally invented them during the 1800s for an opera because the aesthetic appealed to him. And the unwashed barbarian stereotype? Equally false. Vikings were obsessively fastidious about personal hygiene. Archaeological evidence reveals abundant grooming tools: combs, tweezers, razors. Contemporary English chroniclers actually complained that Vikings bathed too frequently, approximately weekly, and maintained their hair too meticulously, making them irresistibly attractive to Anglo-Saxon women. They weren't uncivilized savages. They were impeccably groomed warriors who happened to engage in occasional pillaging. Myth number 6. Cleopatra. Was Egyptian Cleopatra, the iconic Egyptian queen, the face representing an entire North African civilization, wasn't remotely Egyptian by ancestry. She was thoroughly Greek as feta cheese and philosophical debates. Her lineage traces to Ptolemy, one of Alexander the Great's generals who seized control of Egypt generations before her birth. For 3 centuries, her family maintained Greek identity. They spoke Greek, followed Greek traditions, and preserved bloodline purity through sibling marriages, creating a family tree that resembled a tangled circle. What made Cleopatra exceptional? She was the first and only member of the Ptolemaic dynasty to actually learn Egyptian. This wasn't cultural appreciation, it was strategic brilliance. By blood, however, she remained 100% Greek. Myth number 7. Mrs. O'Leary's cow started the Chicago fire. The story is delightfully simple. One clumsy cow belonging to Mrs. O'Leary kicked over a lantern and incinerated an entire major city. Memorable? Absolutely. True? Absolutely not. A journalist fabricated the entire tale, later admitting he invented it because it made superior copy. The O'Learys were impoverished Irish immigrants, convenient scapegoats in a prejudiced era. Reality? Nobody definitively knows what ignited the Great Chicago Fire. The city was a tinderbox of wooden structures during severe drought. Any spark could have triggered catastrophe. But blaming a farm animal owned by poor immigrants was easier than admitting ignorance. Mrs. O'Leary was eventually exonerated. Her innocent cow, however, remains history's most unjustly vilified livestock. Myth number 8. Medieval women were powerless damsels. The fairy tale trope of helpless medieval maidens locked in towers awaiting rescue? It's lazy, inaccurate history that deserves retirement. Yes, medieval society was patriarchal, but characterizing all women as powerless ignores substantial evidence. Social class mattered enormously. Noble women administered vast estates, defended castles during sieges, and navigated complex political landscapes while their husbands campaigned elsewhere. Urban women worked as master brewers, textile specialists, and merchants, operating independent businesses and earning guild membership. Widows could inherit substantial property and wealth, becoming some of the era's most autonomous and economically influential figures. Was it gender equality by modern standards? Obviously not, but it was infinitely more nuanced and complex than the simplistic narratives we've been fed. Myth number 9. Spartans threw imperfect babies off cliffs. The Spartans, history's ultimate warrior society, ruthlessly disciplined, famously brutal. And of course, they supposedly hurled infants deemed unworthy off mountainsides. It's become the defining symbol of their merciless culture, the story that encapsulates their entire legacy. Here's a single glaring problem. They almost certainly never did this. The entire narrative originates from ancient writers like Plutarch, who documented Spartan society centuries after its peak, essentially crafting sensationalized historical fiction. When modern archaeologists excavated the infamous cliff location, they discovered something revealing: no infant remains whatsoever. Instead, they found adult male bones, likely executed criminals or prisoners of war. Accepting this myth as fact is equivalent to future historians reconstructing our civilization based exclusively on jackass episodes. Myth number 10. Humans and dinosaurs coexisted. Did cavemen ever ride triceratops to work? If your historical knowledge comes from the Flintstones or certain internet corners, apparently yes. For everyone operating with basic temporal understanding? Absolutely not. This isn't a minor historical miscalculation, it's a geological chasm of time. Non-avian dinosaurs vanished approximately 65 million years ago. The earliest ancestors remotely resembling humans emerged around 2 to 3 million years ago. That's a 63 million year gap. Not like missing someone by minutes, but missing a party that ended before your species' home planet had properly cooled. Myth. 11. Wild West gunfights were honorable duels. Picture it, high noon, dusty Main Street, two steely-eyed gunslingers with hands hovering over holstered Colts, ready for lightning-fast draws. The most iconic Wild West imagery and almost complete fiction. Authentic frontier gunfights bore zero resemblance to cinematic duels. They were messy, chaotic, and frequently absurd affairs. Forget honorable standoffs. Reality looked more like two intoxicated men clumsily fumbling with weapons behind a saloon until one got shot in the back by his opponent, his accomplice. And those legendary sheriffs who supposedly cleaned up lawless towns with dueling prowess? Most were ordinary local lawmen whose primary responsibilities involved breaking up brawls and arresting public drunkenness, not channeling Clint Eastwood. Myth number 12. Vikings had elaborate flaming ship funerals. The Viking funeral. A fallen chieftain laid to rest aboard his longship, pushed out to sea, then sent to Valhalla in spectacular flames ignited by a single flaming arrow. Undeniably the most epic departure imaginable. Visually stunning on screen. Also a logistical disaster that rarely, if ever, occurred. Consider the practical challenges. Wind, waves, a moving target drifting further from shore. You'd more likely miss completely, ignite the dock, or watch your deceased chief's half-charred vessel embarrassingly wash back to shore the following morning. While fire played roles in Norse funeral rites, cremation typically happened on land. Longships represented massive investments. They weren't casually transformed into expensive, ineffective floating pyres. Myth 113. An apple falling on Newton's head. Revealed gravity. The narrative is elegantly simple. Isaac Newton relaxing beneath a tree, an apple bonking his head, and boom, the complete theory of universal gravitation instantly downloads into his consciousness. It's a charming story making genius seem accessible and spontaneous. That's precisely why it's mythological. Newton himself mentioned being inspired by observing an apple fall, which merely initiated his thinking about the problem. The apple didn't provide answers, it prompted questions. The actual discovery required years of extraordinarily complex mathematics and physics, not fruit functioning as divine head trauma. Genius involves less getting struck by produce and more decades of relentless intellectual work. Myth number 14. Medieval people died around age 30. Common knowledge insists medieval people were fortunate to reach 30 years old. Life was harsh, brutal, and tragically brief, correct? This represents a classic statistical misinterpretation that average life expectancy of 30-35 years is devastatingly skewed by horrific infant and child mortality rates, illnesses we'd easily treat with modern medicine, stomach bugs, fevers, were death sentences for medieval children. Here's the crucial detail. If you survived the gauntlet of childhood and reached your early 20s, your chances of living to 60 or even 70 were surprisingly substantial. That low average wasn't a death countdown for every 29-year-old. It reflected catastrophically high infant mortality. Myth number 15. Pirates made prisoners walk the plank. Walk the plank, you scurvy dog. The quintessential pirate threat. A moment of theatrical terror as captives take a slow, agonizing march toward certain doom. Featured in every pirate movie, novel, and theme park attraction, and almost entirely fabricated. This dramatic punishment was largely popularized by writers like Robert Louis Stevenson in Treasure Island for cinematic effect. Actual pirates were violent criminals, yes, but also brutally practical businessmen. Why waste perfectly good lumber and precious time on theatrical displays? They'd more efficiently stab you, bash your skull, and toss your body overboard. Quicker, more effective, and no cleanup required. Myth. 16. Medieval people never bathed the Middle Ages, an era when everyone was supposedly encrusted in layers of filth so thick that soap seemed like mystical technology. The stench must have been unbearable, right? Let's not get too self-congratulatory about our modern showers. While they lacked artisanal lavender body wash, the notion they never bathed is simply false. Soap in various forms existed. Public bathhouses called stews were common in towns and cities. Cleanliness connected to religious piety. They understood basic hygiene concepts. They simply lacked indoor plumbing infrastructure. They weren't filthy savages. They just had a different, and undoubtedly much colder, definition of bath time. Myth 17. Thumbs down meant death in Roman arenas. In Roman amphitheaters, a defeated gladiator's fate supposedly hung on a single gesture. The emperor's thumb pointed downward. Execution. That iconic thumbs down equals death symbol is so culturally embedded, we use it daily for disliking content online. The problem? It almost certainly meant the exact opposite. Most historical evidence suggests thumbs down, pollis verso, actually signaled mercy, representing a sword being sheathed. The death signal was likely thumbs pointed up, mimicking unsheathing and stabbing, or possibly a closed fist. So every time you dislike something online, you're not condemning it. You're channeling an ancient Roman emperor saying, you know what? Not bad. You live. Myth 18. Ninjas wore all black outfits. Ask anyone to describe a ninja and you'll hear identical descriptions. Silent assassins draped head to toe in sleek all-black garments melting into shadows. The official uniform of movie ninjas everywhere. If an actual ninja in feudal Japan wore this for covert operations, he'd be laughed at before being captured. Why? Pure black doesn't exist naturally at night. Against moonlit skies or dark landscapes, solid black silhouettes actually stand out dramatically. Authentic ninjas, shinobi, were infiltration and disguise masters. They dressed as farmers, monks, merchants, anything enabling them to blend into plain sight. For nighttime missions, they wore navy blue or dark reddish-brown shades that genuinely dissolve into darkness. That all-black aesthetic? It originates from Japanese kabuki theater, where stagehands wore black to signify invisibility to audiences. We essentially adopted theater crew uniforms and called it history. Myth 19. Catherine the Great. Died in a scandalous incident with a horse, Catherine the Great of Russia. Powerful, intelligent, formidable empress who expanded her empire and presided over a golden age. Yet what fact does everyone whisper about her? A grotesque, physically impossible encounter with a horse caused her death. This disgusting rumor represents one of history's most successful character assassinations. Slander so memorable and vile, it has overshadowed her entire legacy. Political enemies, particularly the French court, fabricated it to portray her as a depraved, degenerate monster. The boring, scandal-free reality? She died from a stroke at age 67 in her private chambers. The horse story was weaponized gossip, designed to destroy a powerful woman who dared challenge the European monarch's old boys' club. Myth 20. Thomas Edison invented the light bulb. Thomas Edison, the Wizard of Menlo Park, the man who single-handedly invented the light bulb and illuminated the world. A foundational American ingenuity story. Claiming Edison invented the light bulb is like claiming Columbus invented America, conveniently ignoring everyone already there. Dozens of inventors worked on electric lighting for 50 years before Edison. Humphrey Davy created the first electric arc lamp back in 1802. Joseph Swan, a British inventor, had a functioning incandescent bulb years before Edison and successfully sued him for patent infringement. Edison's actual genius? He wasn't first, but he excelled at making it practical. He didn't invent the light bulb. He perfected a commercially viable, long-lasting, affordable version and, crucially, built the entire electrical grid infrastructure to power it. He was less an inventor, more a brilliant systems engineer and marketing powerhouse. Myth 21. The Trojan Horse. The Trojan Horse, history's most ingenious piece of military deception. Unable to breach Troy's impenetrable walls, Greek forces constructed a massive wooden horse, concealed their elite warriors inside, and presented it as a gift. The Trojans, in what might be history's most catastrophic lapse in judgment, wheeled it inside their city walls. The rest, as they say, is legendary. Brilliant tactical narrative. One problem: that enormous hollow horse probably never existed. Most contemporary historians believe the story functions as metaphor, poetic exaggeration passed down through Homer's epic storytelling. The horse was likely a powerful siege engine, perhaps a battering ram nicknamed the Horse. Alternatively, it could represent an earthquake that finally demolished Troy's formidable defenses, since Poseidon governed both earthquakes and horses in Greek mythology. Captivating tale? Absolutely. But reality probably involved more brute force engineering than brilliant equine carpentry. Ptolemaic, right 22. Henry Ford invented the automobile and assembly line. Henry Ford, the visionary genius who invented the automobile and assembly line, single-handedly putting the world on wheels. Let's apply the brakes to that narrative. Ford invented neither. Carl Benz patented the first true automobile in Germany in 1886, while Ford was still working on a farm. The assembly line concept? Venetian shipyards utilized it during the 16th century. Ransom E. Olds perfected it in his automotive factories years before Ford's involvement. Ford's actual achievement? He took the existing assembly line concept and supercharged it with ruthless, obsessive efficiency. His innovation wasn't inventing the car or the production line. It was weaponizing mass production to manufacture vehicles so rapidly and affordably that average people could actually purchase them. He didn't invent the product. He invented the mass market for it. Myth 23. King Arthur was a real historical figure. King Arthur, noble ruler of Camelot, wielder of Excalibur, leader of the Knights of the Round Table, the quintessential British hero embodying chivalry and justice. He's almost certainly a complete fabrication. Not a single piece of contemporary, archaeological, or historical evidence confirms a King Arthur ever existed. The stories we recognize today are a patchwork of Welsh folklore, poetic embellishments, and romantic tales written centuries after he supposedly lived. He's likely a composite character, a blend of several minor warlords and Celtic mythological heroes merged into one legendary figure. Did a Romano-British leader fight against Anglo-Saxon invaders? Possibly. Was his name Arthur? Did he have a wizard companion and magical sword? Absolutely not. He wasn't a king, he was a legend, and there's a crucial difference. Myth number 24. Pirates, routinely buried treasure. The quintessential pirate fantasy. A weathered, salt-stained treasure map with an X marking the spot where a legendary buccaneer buried chests overflowing with gold doubloons. It's the foundation of countless adventure narratives. Planning to quit your job for treasure hunting? I have disappointing news. The notion that pirates routinely buried treasure is a massive exaggeration, largely thanks to one individual, Captain Kidd. He did bury some loot before capture, hoping to leverage it as a bargaining chip. But he was a massive outlier. For the vast majority of pirates, burying plunder made 0 sense. They were criminals living fast and dying young. Retirement planning wasn't exactly a priority. Any treasure was immediately divided among crew members and spent just as quickly on alcohol, gambling, and entertainment at the nearest port. Why bury gold when you could be enjoying it immediately? Myth, 25. Ancient Romans constantly wore togas. Every movie depicts the same imagery. Ancient Rome as a sea of majestic citizens draped in crisp, flowing white togas. So elegant, so civilized. Reality? A toga was essentially a formal straitjacket constructed from a giant, heavy bedsheet. It was a nightmare to don, impossible to move in, and required specialist cleaning. Think of it as the ancient world's equivalent of a ridiculously expensive, incredibly uncomfortable tuxedo worn exclusively to impress people at weddings. For actual daily life, Romans wore tunics. What's a tunic? Basically, the hoodie and sweatpants of antiquity, simple, practical, comfortable. Rome wasn't a 24/7 toga party. It was a city full of people who, like us, couldn't wait to get home and change into something that didn't require an instruction manual. Myth. 26. The croissant is French. The French croissant, that perfect buttery symbol of French culture. You can practically taste Parisian mornings just thinking about it. Prepare for disillusionment. The French completely appropriated it. Their national pastry is a culinary immigrant from Vienna, Austria. The original was called a kipferl, shaped like a crescent to mock the Ottoman Empire's flag following a military victory. How did this Austrian trophy snack become French? An Austrian baker opened a Parisian bakery in the 1830s and got the city completely hooked. French bakers, recognizing brilliance, copied it, perfected it with puff pastry, and slapped a French name on it. History's greatest culinary heist. Myth. 27. Medieval people threw waste out windows. Medieval hygiene, or lack thereof. The popular narrative claims you'd constantly hear "Gardy Lou" before being drenched in human waste cascading from windows above. Fantastic, disgusting imagery. But think logically for a moment. Would you really dump your own filth directly outside your front door, next to your neighbor who owns a very large sword? While it occasionally happened, it wasn't standard practice. Most towns had public latrines or designated cesspits. Sure, these facilities were probably portals to new dimensions of stench and disease, but it beat living beneath a constant sewage waterfall. This myth exists primarily to make us feel superior about our glorious modern plumbing. Myth number 28. The White House was painted white to cover burn. Marx. Why is the White House white? The popular story is epic American defiance. The British burned it in 1812, so Americans painted it white to cover scorch marks, a middle finger made of paint. Fantastic narrative. Completely wrong. The truth is painfully mundane. It was always white. From construction beginning in 1792, builders used lime-based whitewash to protect the sandstone from weather. People were already calling it the White House years before British forces arrived with their torches. The post-war paint job wasn't patriotic cover-up, it was regular home maintenance. The historical equivalent of discovering your superhero's origin story is filing taxes. Myth 29. The Titanic was advertised as unsinkable. The Titanic, the unsinkable ship. That single word forms the foundation of its tragic legend, representing ultimate human arrogance. Here's the revelation. The company that built it, the White Star Line, never advertised it as unsinkable. Not once. Where did the most famous fact about the Titanic originate? The media fabricated it after it sank. Journalists slapped that label on the story because unsinkable ship sinks creates far more ironic, compelling headlines than really big ship has terrible accident. They literally invented the hubris to sell more newspapers. One of history's greatest pieces of misinformation, and we all accepted it. Myth 30. Atlantis was a real lost civilization. Atlantis, the legendary lost city. A super-advanced civilization that vanished beneath the waves. People have wasted fortunes and lifetimes searching for it. All for nothing. You might as well search for the lost city of Oz. Atlantis was a complete invention by philosopher Plato. He created it for his writings as a fictional example, a thought experiment. He essentially wrote speculative fiction about a perfect society that became greedy and was destroyed by the gods, all to illustrate a philosophical point to his students. It was never meant as historical account. It was a cautionary tale. Plato is probably still laughing in his grave at everyone who took his political allegory literally. Myth 31. Napoleon's troops shot off the Sphinx's nose. The Sphinx is missing its nose, and for centuries everyone blamed Napoleon's troops, claiming they used it for cannon practice. Fun story, especially for those who enjoy blaming the French. But we have evidence. Drawings made by travelers decades before Napoleon was even born all show the Sphinx already noseless. The real culprit? Likely a 14th century cleric absolutely furious that local peasants worshipped what he considered a giant pagan idol. He allegedly took matters, and a chisel, into his own hands and performed unauthorized facial reconstruction. It wasn't bored soldiers. It was one very angry man who really despised that statue. There you have it. Time for the historical confession booth. Head to the comments and admit it. Which of these myths have you passionately defended, arguing to the death with friends or family, only to realize now you were spectacularly wrong? Consider yourselves officially rescued from the swamp of fabricated history. Your payment? A like? Subscribing is your insurance policy against future misinformation. You know what to do.